Today there are about 25 countries without an army, but I'll ask you, which one of them was first? Which country do you think was the first to voluntarily give up its armed forces? If you guessed a European country, you're not even on the right continent. It was actually a Latin American country, and that was, of course, Costa Rica. On December 1st, 1948, after a civil war under President Jose Figueres Ferrer's administration, Costa Rica put an end to its military career. And you know what? This wasn't actually a bad move. Since then, the country hasn't had a single war or a single coup. In fact, Costa Rica can boast about being the country with the longest uninterrupted period of democratic government in Latin America. Because, dear viewer, let's not forget the enormous weight that the military boot has traditionally had on Latin America. Then there's the fact that Costa Rica is located in one of the most violent regions in the world, Central America. Well, despite this tropical country located between the Caribbean Sea and the Pacific Ocean has managed to become a middle-income country with quite high levels of prosperity. So what's the recipe here? Well, prosperity, peace, and safety. These are the ingredients that have made Costa Rica habitually known as the Switzerland of Latin America. Now, what is true in all of this? And in this video, we want to tell you a bit more about Costa Rica. We want to have a look at its light, but also at its shadows. So let's dive in.
The happy face.
However we look at it, Costa Rica is a very special country. Divya, we're talking about a country whose hallmark color is green. Because if Costa Rica is associated with anything, it's biodiversity. You see, with an area that's almost 10 times smaller than that of Spain or 25 times smaller than Peru, this country is estimated to have more than 5% of all the world's animal and plant biodiversity. And in this country, they understand this is not just a sign of identity, but also a potentially great competitive advantage. For example, among other things, it can help develop a differentiated tourism industry and position a strong country brand. That is to say, one that gives higher value to local products, especially for international consumers. Because who wouldn't be willing to pay a bit more for products considered to be produced cleanly and in an environmental haven? And Costa Ricans, well, they take these policies very, very seriously. Costa Rica strives to be an ecological power, and it absolutely is. Today, more than 25% of national territory is protected, and the vast majority of electricity comes from renewable sources: hydroelectric, geothermal, and wind power. And not only that, Costa Rica is the only country in the region, and one of the few in the world, that has managed to reverse deforestation. The territory covered by forests has increased from 21% in 1987 to over 50% in the present day. Something that, by the way, they achieved thanks to a curious payment system for environmental services. Allow me to explain this. In Costa Rica, a part of the taxes on fuels goes to fund Costa Rican forest financing, a fund that pays farm and forest owners who want to join the program voluntarily to conserve their natural space and implement projects that help strengthen it. And that's not all. Many companies also pay into this fund to offset their impact on the environment, something like corporate social responsibility that's promoted by the state. Now, I think this leads to a really interesting debate, because for some, this policy is a bit of a monstrosity, whereas for others, it'll be a way of recognizing the negative externalities of productive activities, such as the pollution caused by factories. And also, of course, there's the positive externalities on natural areas.
Half of our territory is covered by forests, and we have an ample system of protected areas that not only protect an important part of the planet's biodiversity, but also sustain important sectors of our economy, as for example tourism. Carlos Alvarado, president of Costa Rica.
Personally, I believe that if these types of initiatives are accompanied by policies that promote the creation of companies and new types of businesses, they could be really successful. But let's leave it open to debate. You can let us know what you think of all of this in the comments. But now let's move on from this. The fact is that this type of political approach doesn't seem to have been at odds with the country's economic growth. Since the year 2000, the Costa Rican economy has grown by around 4% every year, which, even if it doesn't seem like much, has been a higher average growth rate than that of the rest of Latin America and the OECD countries. And that's not all. Costa Rica is undergoing something similar to what we saw with New Zealand if we measure variables besides GDP. For example, if we consider life expectancy, salaries, the situation of companies, etc., then Costa Rica comes out even better. We can take a look at the Legatum Prosperity Index and the ranking of countries by GDP per capita in purchasing power parity, that is, taking price differences into account. If we do, we'll notice that Costa Rica's GDP per capita is the 6th largest in Latin America. That is, it's below Chile, Panama, Uruguay, Argentina, and Mexico, and 76th in the world. In the Global Prosperity Index, Costa Rica rises to the 29th place, being the second country in Latin America, closely behind Uruguay. But if you want some clear proof, the average life expectancy in Costa Rica is the 3rd highest in the entire American continent, being higher, for example, than that of the United States. So Costa Rica, it looks like a prosperous, peaceful country committed to the preservation of the environment, which all sounds pretty great, right? Well, hold on for a moment, because this country has another face. Costa Rica is facing very complicated challenges. So listen up.
Challenges that threaten the country.
Costa Rica is a country that has achieved great things, especially if we compare it with many of its neighbors. However, right now it's facing political, economic, and social challenges that threaten its path to prosperity. The first one, clearly, it's got a lot to do with the economy. See, even though Costa Rica has had a solid performance, it still has a long way to go. Currently, its GDP per capita is just over 40% of the average for the OECD countries. And here's the problem. The last government was, how do you want to say it, a bit irresponsible with their fiscal policy, which left Costa Rica in a rather delicate situation. Only in the last 10 years, the public debt has more than doubled in terms of GDP. The 2018 deficit will approach 7%, and $1 of every $3 of public spending will go towards paying that debt.
While in 2008, taxes financed 70% of all central government expenditures, in 2017, they were only enough to finance 50%, and the difference had to be covered with indebtedness. Jorge Corrales Coseda.
Fortunately, there seems to be a political consensus. If this situation doesn't change, Costa Rica could face several problems. But only focusing on raising taxes could also be counterproductive. The country's tax on corporate profits is already one of the highest in the world. And it's not only taxes. For example, the cost of electricity and fuel, which lies in the hands of public monopolies, are among some of the most expensive in the region, which obviously affects competitiveness. Due to increases like these, the labor participation rate, the rate of people who work, is really rather low. The president, Carlos Alvarado, really needs to open up the economy and allow competition and, if possible, set a path so that the large public companies can be shared by Costa Ricans. The second challenge has to do with violence. In recent years, violence has grown a lot in a country that was traditionally very safe and very quiet. And, well, this does have a simple explanation: drug traffickers. Yep, as you may already know, drug traffickers are ravaging a large part of Latin America, and now they're trying to extend their influence to Costa Rica, which is a good path for their merchandise. And third, well, the third challenge has a lot to do with politics. The last elections were a good example of how radical and populist messages that target civil liberties are a great threat. See, the first electoral round, held in February, wasn't won by Carlos Alvarado, but by Fabricio Alvarado, an evangelist pastor who has a very radical discourse. Among his obsessions was pursuing any societal model that differed from what he perceived as convenient, especially anything related to equal marriage. And of course, anyone can say what they want and lead their lives however they please, but when a politician wants the government to devote itself to religion and persecute those who don't agree with their life model, it can become really dangerous. Here is Laura Mosquera, Fabricio Alvarado's wife, in the middle of their campaign. And don't try and tell me that she's not scary.
Y el Espíritu Santo viene con interpretación y ramasheka taramasoa y kotoromo kendara mamamasheke teramasoa ingoromo sokantara makeara masheka taram.
Fortunately, in the second round, this evangelical pastor, whose speech had a lot of hatred and very little love, suffered a crushing defeat, even though he still won 30% of the votes. But it's this sort of populism that Costa Rica is going to have to be very careful with in the future. But to viewer, that's kind of the way things are. Carlos Alvarado has just been elected president, and it's now in his hands to get Costa Rica back on track. To achieve this, he'll have to change a lot of things, and don't forget that the best way to fight poverty is by promoting more dynamic, open, and competitive economies. Companies are, no question, going to have to play a prominent role in all of this. But now it's your turn. Do you think that Costa Rica's green model is one other countries should follow? Do you think that Costa Rica itself is a model to follow? Well, leave your answers in the comments as well as in this survey, and I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please do hit that like button if you did, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for brand new videos every Monday and every Thursday. Also, don't forget to check out our friends at the Reconsider Media podcast. They provided the vocals in this episode that were not mine. And as always, thank you for watching.
Y kotoromo kendara mamamasheke teramasoa.